We can make it. We can make it. Good evening, y'all. Good evening.
Good
How
evening.
how is everyone doing? We are excited to be joining you again for another Sister Chat live. I am excited. I am Sharhonda Ford. Let me not forget who I am. I'm Sharhonda Ford, licensed clinical mental health counselor. I am a psychotherapist, a hope dispenser, a marriage coach, a trauma specialist, and I am just excited in a worn down kind of way to share tonight. Tonight might be heavy in nature, but it's going to be light in spirit. So grab your tissues in case this is a topic that might hit home for you. And like, share, and tell someone about this video. This is gonna be deep, y'all. So go on and share.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Lashon Smiley-Moseley, educator, wife, mother, daughter, trained life coach. I finished my last class next week, so I will be certified in the state of Maryland. So I'm really excited about that. And as my sister said, tonight's topic is grief. I forgot to grab my tissue, so I'll be using my sleeve because sometimes the tears just come and we don't, we're not pre-warned. There's no preamble. There's no beeping, blaring smoke detector to let that you're about to go into distress. And sometimes all you have is your t-shirt, your sleeve. But we gonna make it.
We gonna make it. So, sister, tell me, you start. How was your day today?
It's Friday. Fridays are always great, especially when I get to connect with students. I was in 3 classes between 9 and 12 o'clock, working with teachers and students. And Fridays are always fun and light. So we did some book talks and got to connect with students and just hear what's going on with them. And that always gives me hope because we hear, that the students aren't doing well. We hear, with the COVID numbers increasing, there's just so much heaviness. And so when I get to connect with the students, and just, some of them brought their pets on camera. We talked about some hopes, some wishes, and some things we don't like. And so I'm sitting in a place of gratitude this evening that I have an opportunity to work with, young people. And so today was a really good day. Like I said, I'm sitting in a place of gratitude. And how about you? How was your day?
My day was really good. I am embarking on some new things that I'll be able to share soon, and so it was deep. And it was kind of, it was full of highs and lows. I'm excited about the space that I am in, this opportunity that God has given me, this journey that I am on. And then my heart is heavy at just constant news of loss. And so it's kind of like the ebbs and the flows. I'm trying to really sit in the space that I'm in, but still be able to be productive in that space. So I'm really excited. Some amazing things have been happening in the background that my sister, friend, coach has been helping me with. So y'all just stay tuned. I'm gonna put my website in the chat box. And I want you, if you haven't, to go over to the website and join the mailing list. There are going to be some hot things on the horizon and you don't want to miss it. So I'm just telling y'all to go on and sign up. So I'm just excited because all these things are coming together in the midst of such darkness.
Mm-hmm. Earlier this week, I was talking to a client and they were struggling with being grateful and happy in the midst of all of the sadness and turmoil. And, I had to, we worked through the session. And at the end, the person was able to understand that it's okay for them to be happy and joyful and not take full responsibility and weight of the sadness around them.
Mhm.
So,
How
yeah.
how how do we do that? How do we take?
Yeah. And so for me as a coach, for each individual, it's different. And helping the person to find what works for them that's going to give them that relief they need. And so for each individual, it's a little different, but I think it starts with acknowledging how you're feeling. And all feelings, as we have said before on this platform, all feelings are valid, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, a lot of times we encourage people to kind of like rush over. Oh, you're sad. It's okay. You'll say to the child, here, have a cookie, cheer up. What do I need to do to make you happy? And
Mhm.
so the person never actually addresses how they're feeling. And
Mhm.
I know you have thoughts on that too. What comes up for you?
Not addressing how they're feeling. I think that, and I've talked about it, and we're going to get like real deep into it shortly. I want to say this though, for those who are watching or listening, I know we're streaming like all over the place today, trying to meet people where they are. So there are people on Facebook and there are people on YouTube, and people who are connecting through Instagram as well coming to the feed. I will say this, if you are on the feed and you don't see your comment, you need to go to your settings and make sure you have given StreamYard permission. A lot of times we get off the live and we don't even know people were there because of the way the settings are set up. And so we want to be able to say hello to you, to acknowledge you, to see your questions, especially to be able to answer your questions when something comes up. So we want you to know we are not overlooking you if you've been posting. It's just the way the permissions are set in StreamYard. Sometimes we don't get to see them. So, to LaShawn's question about acknowledging it, I think that, I mean, it's no secret in June, I made this huge announcement that I'm going to be taking this platform and I have started a podcast and I am talking about the challenges with infertility. And so, one thing that I've learned, and I think it really parallels with what you're saying, LaShawn, is that I sat in silence, not acknowledging what I was feeling for almost 14 years. To my detriment, it debilitated and it paralyzed me. And so that, even that feeling alone is so, it's grief, right? Because I was grieving loss for 13 years, 14 years, even still now. I'm grieving the hopes that I had, the dreams that I had for a family and for motherhood. And, so there are some variables here that really are hitting home to me in this season. And so I think it's essential that people really, really are cognizant of what they're feeling and not be ashamed or afraid to sit in, to acknowledge, to identify, and to address what you're feeling.
Woo! And the conversation is only 9 minutes into it. And you touched on grief. And I think often when we think of grief, we think of death. We think of there was a funeral. We think, there was a send off, a homegoing, that there was some finality, like there was some like end to it. But a lot of times, the grief that we are left swirling around with isn't always related to death. I mean, I'm just thinking of transitioning from being a couple to being parents.
Hmm.
I'm thinking of transitioning COVID,
Mhm.
the grief, So a lot of times I think we look at grief and we relate it to the death of our loved ones, which is absolutely a real thing. But grief, by definition, from a clinician point, how do you define grief?
Grief is any loss, right? I think we look at grief, and you touched something, and it just prompted me to do something. I think that we look at grief and feel like it's just the death, right? But it extends beyond that. And so one of the things I just did, I actually have a group that's called LPC Counseling Exam Prep prayer group. So I created this group a couple of years ago when I was studying for the licensing exam for a counselor, for clinicians to be who needed support, right? In this group are people who have not passed the test, right? So people who have taken a test 1, 2, 7, 8, 9 plus times, and there's grief associated with failing the test. And so as you were speaking, the Lord laid on my heart to share this live stream with that group. I've never done that before, but what I know is that there are people in that group that are experiencing grief beyond the loss of a loved one. There's the grief of not passing this exam, prohibits you from being licensed, and it can slow down the progression of what your dream is. It doesn't mean that you won't reach it, because a delay is not a denial, but it does cause grief. And so I was just prompted, that's grief. Not passing that test is grief. Not seeing loved ones. There's a separation that can look like grief. When you don't get a job, when a relationship is broken, there's grief there. When I gotta, as you know, right, bone on bone on my knees, and there's restrictions, right, that this has caused me, and so I grieve that. So I think there's so many things. Listen, when I realized that I couldn't eat dairy the way I wanted to, I grieve ice cream. So that may seem silly, but that's the reality, that you can grieve multiple things.
So that brings up for me multiple things. So does that also speak to you could have multiple emotions happening simultaneously? So
Oh,
you
sure.
could have joy and you could have right.
Listen, listen. So multiple emotions simultaneously. And I'm gonna say this, guys, if you are listening or watching and you've experienced grief, just in the chat room type grief, right? Or type whoa, or type grief, something to let us know that you're following us and you are with us. But when I talked about on that video yesterday that I watched me singing and sitting at the piano, there was joy in my heart. The joy that these are moments that I had with my grandmother, the joy that she, saw this dream for me to sit at the piano, to be a pianist, to sing, and to play for the church, things I didn't want to do, but I got joy remembering and realizing that I did something for someone else that brought someone else joy in that moment and brought me joy in this moment. And then right parallel with that joy was the sorrow and the sadness of grief that overwhelmed me.
Mm. I think that's a lot to take in and acknowledge. And I wonder, for anyone listening, if you have struggled with denying yourself time to process.
Hmm. So as a clinician, right, as a psychotherapist, I think sometimes I have denied myself time to process. Some people may not know this, but when my grandmother was dying, I was finishing my internship for counseling. And so I was sitting with people every day while waiting on a word. And so 50 minutes at a time seemed so impossible to do. I had to turn off all of the banner messages from my phone so nothing would pop up, because that caught me a couple times. That banner pop up, the messages on the watch, all those things where you'd be like, oops, shouldn't have done that. And so because I'm sitting with people sometimes 9 hours out of a day, I sometimes have to put my peace and my processing on hold. And sometimes we just get too busy and we forget that we're hurting.
Yeah. And I think about, you hear a lot about, oh, you're just going through the process. You're going through the stages of grief, and it'll get better. And so we don't acknowledge the person's feelings or we diminish them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was one of the questions that came up in response to yesterday's chat. What do you say? How do you handle when someone doesn't acknowledge or validate your feelings?
So there are a couple of things, and I will say this. I learned this lesson from my cousin, Michelle Hicks, probably 20 plus years ago. When Michelle lost her mother, my cousin Annie, who cousin Nanny, who I loved, I was not present for Michelle. I wasn't present for Michelle because I did not know how to be. And so I didn't realize I wasn't present for Michelle until someone I loved wasn't present for me. And when I talked to Michelle about it one day, Michelle said to me, "Do you remember when my mother passed? This is what happened." And at that moment, I was able to relate that that person who I feel was not there for me when Nana Palmer died, may just not have known how to be there based on their own stuff. So sometimes it may seem like people are not there for us. But the problem or the challenge that we have as people is that we expect things from people that they may not have the capacity to give. And so when you're looking for someone to be there for you in the manner in which you think you've been there for them, and they don't show up that way, we can't always assume that they're not being there or that they are negating or dismissing or minimizing our feelings. We have to just hold on to the fact that maybe they don't have the capacity to sit with us in this space.
And what I hear you saying is you guys had a conversation. And I think that's where we break down is, yes, it was a challenge that she wasn't there for you and you weren't there for this person. But where I think we get into like the muddying of the waters is we allow ourselves to tell this story. And for years, I didn't understand it. Somebody do you wrong, you done with them. But through coaching, I've realized that we tell ourselves the story and our brains are trying to protect us. And so it tells us this story that is completely false because once you had this conversation with her, it was like, oh, that's what this was about. And then the relationship goes on. But we tell, we get into this thing of, oh, she wasn't there for me, who she thinks she is. I've done X, Y, and Z for her. And it's really just a misunderstanding from both parties. And so what I hear you saying is that what we need to do is question the person coming from a place of curiosity and love. So if someone doesn't validate your feelings, ask them, like, what's coming up for you? How do you handle grief in your home, in your family? And just having an open conversation and even saying to them, I'm really hurt right now that I'm telling you that I'm sad that I'm remembering that my grandmother passed 5 years from now and you aren't showing up for me. Here's what I need you to do for me. And understand that they may not be able to be what you need them to be, and you need to be okay with that.
I think that that's the part that we don't understand. I think that we don't understand that everybody doesn't have the capacity. And so Kari and I were having a conversation the other day, and I was complaining because that's what I do. And so what he said to me was, "You can't expect them to be you to you." And I was like, and I looked over, and in my time hop, my post said, "Stop looking for people to be you to you." And it was like from 8 years ago. I'm like, dang it, Sharhonda, you didn't get the lesson yet? But that's real. And you know that, right? Because you know it would be in your best interest to, um, but I think that one, we got to realize that people process differently.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd have the capacity to sit with people that are hurting. I cry all the daggone time. So why would I feel like, you know, I can be there for somebody else? But this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. But I know, like for me, I know I have a really I won't say bad habit, but a mindset of sometimes I look at something and I'll think, why are they doing it that way? That's not how I would do it.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until recently I was having a conversation with Dre, and he was like, that's how you would do it. That's not how they are going to do it. And so every time I'm making this statement, I'm judging them. I'm coming up with an assumption about this person because they're not doing it the way I think they should do it. So then I want to either sit and complain about it or criticize them. But really, if I focus on my business and not their business, I wouldn't be stressed.
Were they gonna wear a tutu?
So, and so I think it's really hard for us to take ego out the way. Like we think the world revolves around us. Like we feel like we're the center of everything. And so we look at everything from our perspective. And we're like, well, why are they doing it That's not how you pack. Why are you putting the food in a gallon bag? I like the food put in a storage container. Well, then when it's your turn, you get to do it the way you want. And that's something I'm trying to learn, to be less concerned about other people's business and worry about myself. But it is a challenge. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 50 years. So
Mhm.
it's a real challenge to try to
But now I'm not gonna make that all negative, because I think it also is at the core of who you are. So when you are someone that cares and nurtures people, you're looking for ways that they won't get hurt, or looking for simpler or better ways for them to do it, and so that comes up that way. But to circle back to the grief component, I think one of the things is that we don't all grieve the same. And so just because we don't grieve the same doesn't mean that people aren't paying attention or people aren't watching, or, I don't think it means any of that. So when I think about Nana, I use Nana as an example because I've watched her so long. So she was one of 16 and she buried 16, right? And so I watched her bury everybody up into her baby brother, Uncle Ed. When this is the routine of what would happen, the phone, this is how I learned grief.
Mm-hmm.
Phone rings, you get some paper, you hear oh wow, she would grab a notebook,
Uh-huh.
she would go sit down at the kitchen table, she'd make about 5 more calls, okay, and then you start the tree, and that would start the process. Sharhonda, go get the photo albums. We go get photo albums. We have a cup of Sanka. She add the E&J to her Sanka, and then she would, and to get the typewriter, you start working on the obituary. That's what I knew to be. We never talked anything about it except you get the call, you make the calls, you start the plan, you execute the plan, and then when it's over, you go back on like nothing has happened. And she working 2 jobs, she going to work, she's not saying anything, she's not doing anything, she just moving. But when Uncle Ed died, I remember us walking out that house that day, and the Green Nova was sitting there, and we were in Georgia, and she's leaning on the door of the van, and she dropped a tear. Looking at her like, what the heck happened here? Who was he? I done watched you not be moved by 12 other people, and now you're going to shed a tear over this man that lived 13 hours away? I never seen you cry. So it was foreign for me, and I didn't know how to handle it. Because all I knew is that certain people fall out of a funeral, and I better not. That's what I knew about grief, that you don't fall out. But she managed it differently. And then from that, I began to watch her and notice differently. It didn't mean that she loved them anymore. She just said that just was hard. You know, maybe it hit her at that point. The more of them died, the more of it, them, you know, it just, she had, I guess, maybe had become so accustomed to it because this is what she did. And I think we see that in people. You see it in parents whose children go to jail. People grieve that. Parents whose children go to jail, parents who are trying to get their children out of trouble, parents who are fighting, they're grieving the loss of the child that they, you know, have fought for. And so you see that, and it gets to that point where they hear their child was arrested and be like, oh, I know, you know, it's an expectation that has numbed that layer of feeling that you would ordinarily have. And so we don't all grieve or process things differently, and it doesn't change the fact that we care. It just is a different response to how we act toward it.
Yeah. And I know for some people, when grief is too powerful and they kind of disconnect, they isolate from their family and from friends, and they are no longer going out. And at a point, the person grieving will look up and find themselves alone.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the scenario of, where is once the music stops, where is everyone? And then that spirals you deeper into a depression. Can you, what do you say to that?
Listen, what do we do with the space between the notes? I think I don't know, maybe somebody can chime in. Is it the Black people thing? We know, and I think a lot of it does have to do with culture, because we talked about the difference between I had this conversation with someone who's not a person of color, and they were like, they get casseroles. When somebody dies, someone will bring a casserole to the house, or they whatever, and they don't necessarily congregate. But we know that when someone dies, before you can find out that the person has died and get to the undertaker, you got 65 pans of chicken in your house and 45 people. You got to go get chairs and all types of stuff. Now, I'm not sure where that came from, but for some reason we front load support, and the phone stops ringing as soon as the body is in the ground. I mean, let's really face it. If we think about the structure of funeral services and, celebrations of life, you have the viewing and the wake. It's crowded, it's packed, people coming through. Then you have the funeral, and sometimes it's not attended at the same level as the wake or the viewing, because the time schedule or whatever. And then you have the burial. It's the process thins out as you go through. So there's all these people calling, all these people commenting, all these people showing up. You're at the viewing, the funeral thins out, the burial thins out, the repast, depending on who cooking, folk be there. But then after that, it's crickets. And so you are stuck with the silence and nothing but the voices of your pain and your grief and your despair and your loneliness. And then it becomes it can turn into bitterness, because you are wondering, where is everyone at? Where's everyone who said, call me if you need something? Where is everyone who said, I got you? Where are all the people who, hit you up on Facebook with the RIP?
Yeah, but here's the funny thing that I know for me, when my grandmother passed away, I didn't want phone calls because I would be okay. Like, I was functioning. I had, got myself together and I'm doing something. And then you get a text, oh, how are you? Or a phone call. And then you have to kind of go back to that place where you had just used all this energy to just show up, to go to work, or to be a mom, or to cook. And then you get that phone call of someone checking on you. And yes, it's nice to be checked on, but there were times when it came at a time I didn't, it wasn't welcomed.
So how do you handle that?
Yeah. So at that time, I took time off from work.
Mm-hmm.
I was really sad because my grandmother she was my other mom. From the time I was 3 until probably 12, I lived, or something like that. I lived with her. And so we were really close. Her birthday is March 27th. Mine is the 24th. And she always jokingly said that, I was her birthday gift. And so I took her death really hard. So I did. I took about maybe 7 days off from work. And I really just gave myself time, because sometimes that's the only thing you can do, is give yourself time to just feel those emotions, go through the process. But I knew I couldn't stay there too long, because her legacy and, the way I had watched her grieve, very similar to what you described. She had buried her mother, her siblings, and, these matriarchs were strong women. But I found myself struggling with, am I weak? When I was sad and depressed, like, when I was down about, I'm like, wait, there was like this, imbalance, because I hadn't seen her do that. And then my mom, she kept right on moving along. And so I was like, well, is there something wrong with me? Why am I sad? Why do I need to take time off from work? Should I, get right back out there? And, I had to do what I needed to do. As we said earlier, each person kind of grieves differently, and not judge.
But I think you made a good point by bringing up weakness, right? Why does that? How does that translate to weakness, right? I think that I think that it can be, it's a detriment to us going through the process, that we have to be so concerned with what people think about how we feel or how we respond to what we're feeling. I think that's what we're trying to get through, and break the stigma that we've got to keep going on like it's cool, right? And so that whole concept of weakness, what the heck is weakness? Like, what is it? What is weakness?
Yeah, what is it, right? I think I'll speak about myself. I won't, make a blanket statement for a whole race of people, but I know for me, looking at the women in my life, there was no time to stop. There was no time to lay in the bed and be down, because bills needed to be paid, the church services that they were tending to, the communities they were serving, they were looked upon in the community as the strength. So the example that I saw made me think that that's what I needed to keep doing. And so I think we look to the members of our family, we look at how they handle these situations as kind of our yardstick. Like that's our thermometer. That's what we're measuring ourselves up against, not realizing that was a different time. And so mental health was not a topic. That wasn't a conversation. Like you said, there's the business of processing the death, to pull out the notebook, to write the obituary, who's taking what casserole, who's calling the funeral home. The functionality is what we are used to seeing. And I saw in the chat where someone said they were angry. And anger is definitely one of the stages of grief. Yeah. Would you speak a little to for everyone that's listening, kind of as what are those stages of grief? I know anger. What do we have? Acceptance is the final, like just acceptance.
Can we go back to that question? I want to hit back on the it's okay part for a moment. And one of the things that I would say is, what a year ago, I started hearing and thinking about everybody who responds. If you think about people's response, a lot of time people were like, it's okay. This is what we hear, right? So we hear, I'm okay. I looked up the hashtag on Instagram, and 229,000 I'm okay hashtags. And then it's okay. 587,000 it's okay hashtags. I'll be okay. 46,000 I'll be okay hashtags. It is what it is. 1.3 million hashtags. It is what it is. And then whatever, 4.1 million whatever hashtags. I think what has happened when I think of the weakness, us acknowledging our feelings, and I looked this up, and it has grown exponentially since I looked it up, is that we all negate our feelings. And so when we think about the concept of weakness and we think about what we're feeling, we dismiss them personally with those hashtags. It is what it is. It's okay. Well, I mean, I'm just feeling that. It is what it is. I don't know what it's whatever. Well, how you feel, I'll be okay. We have been conditioned to dismiss and negate and minimize our feelings. And so why would we do it any other way? Right? We often talk about generational curses, but I'm starting to talk more about generational conditioning. And I think that when we look at grief and the stigma that comes along with feeling what you feel, that is a level of generational conditioning. It has been passed down through generations that it is not okay for us to acknowledge what we feel. It's not okay for us to grieve. It's not okay to talk about the empty seat at the table. It's not okay to experience sorrow or sadness or fear or anger or disdain or any of those things. So we have been conditioned generationally as a people, as a race, because we have always been taught to be tough.
Yeah. In the chat, share with us, how do you handle managing your grief? How do you handle moving forward? Or what is coming up for you right now?
There's a couple of comments there. You want to read them? I saw Karen's.
All right. Are you putting it up, or you want me to get?
So
all right. Karen says, when I lost my grandmother, I was mad. And that's real. Yes, I relate to that.
yeah, I think even that too. I think, especially as a believer, right? So for me, we talked about healing, and so I think it's important to make this statement because as Christians, we want to put prayer on everything, right? Or we're gonna pray and the Lord's gonna heal, or don't speak that and don't speak this, and we're gonna, But I think that it's important to also note that healing on this side is not always the will of God. And I think that as believers, we get that twisted. We think that somehow God has failed us when he has allowed our loved ones to transition. But in the grand scheme of things, the word does say the Lord that it is appointed a man a time to live and a time to die, right? So we already know that that is what we are going. We came here to die. So we getting mad at God for doing that which he has already said that he was going to do because it's not in our timing. It would never be our timing if we had our say. We want to keep the people we love close to us. So that's where that anger comes in. I know for me, I'd be like, Lord, the Lord could have healed my father, right? He could have healed Nana. He could have healed Big Ma. He could have done it. He could have healed these people who have died. When I think of loss, I think of the heaviest thing for me when I just came to me is the Beals family in Jersey City. I mean, they are getting hit, and they're not just getting hit this year with COVID. They've been getting hit. The father Beals just died. The son, Gerald Beals, just died. The daughter, they have lost children and parents, and it's just bam, 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 and they are strong people of faith. It doesn't mean that God doesn't love them, but it is tough. It is tough. And so, the prayerfulness, those things are essential, but we also have to remember in our anger, be ye angry, but do not sin. God did heal my dad. He healed him on the other side, not this side of glory. He healed Big Ma. He healed Nana. He healed these people on the other side. That don't make me feel good for this side. But that's the reality when we look at it from the spiritual realm. So Karen said, my mom had to really talk to me. Absolutely. Because I know I know she was telling you this is the Lord's will. Um, Monica said people back off or call too much because they don't know what you need. My phone even went off on that, Monica. Everybody deals with grief differently, and nobody knows how to be around the person grieving. Monica, Lashon, will you star? Here's the thing. Here's the thing, Monica. I have said this since the beginning of this year. When I think about how to sit with people, sometimes all you need to do is be present and to sit in silence. I think about Job. And the Bible says that Job's friends came to him and they sat there. They didn't say a word. They were just present, letting Job know that they were there. And sometimes people do not need you to talk to them. Sometimes people just need you to know that they are there. That's it.
And I think that's a good practice. Instead of trying to take the pain away from the person, just and I think that is empathy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. And so I think it's still it's awkward and it's uncomfortable because you want to take that, you see this person that you care about and you see them in pain and you want to relieve it. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm now sitting in a place of just letting the person know, hey, I'm here not to talk, but if you just want me to be on the other end of this receiver because of COVID, because I can't come be with you. But if you would like me to, get on a Zoom and just, we just make sure each other are breathing. One of the things I started doing is just on like a lifeline check-in. Like I'm just checking in, just send me back an emoji, like just type X, like
Mm-hmm.
instead of, whereas in the past, I think we would say, hey, you want to talk? What's wrong? How can I help? So learning to be uncomfortable within the discomfort.
With it. Lori and I talked about that today. We were talking about just checking in. That people, you don't always have to talk. You don't feel like you want to talk. Just let me know you're good. Just say, just like you
Or
said.
I'm not good. What if I'm not good?
But when I say good, show a sign of life. That's what, let me put it that way. Just show a sign of life. That's it. Christina said, praying tears. And then she said, I lost my mom and I was jealous of everyone whose mom was still here. And I said, why me? Christina, I absolutely can understand that. Not in that same context, but I feel like Father's Day, for the first like 5 years, Tawanda and I had a ritual. We would be together. I did not want to be around anyone in their father. Nobody want to do that. I was like, I'm not finna sit here and watch y'all enjoy this time. And so, I think I kind of have graduated past that. A lot of times I spend time with Dre. But I think that is a natural thing because you're looking, and I'm even will go a step further to say sometimes I try and be cognizant when I'm around people who have lost their mother, that I try not to say mommy, or I try to either say my mother or Patricia, or sometimes I'll call her play pal, kind of out of consideration for other people, because the mommy can hurt. It hurt for me to hear kids say mommy. Right. So I think that I can relate to that on a reversal side, because sometimes when I hear kids say it, it's kind of like, it hits a place that is hard. Karen said, not realizing the more we prayed, we was holding them here, they were suffering more. Absolutely. It's really a selfish concept. That's what it is. Asia and I talked about that this week. We talked about Nana and the gratitude that we can have that she didn't suffer. Right? That you can have gratitude in that. And so I cling to the gratitude so that I can release some of the grief. Monica said, my mom died 20 years ago and I'm still hurt. Most days I try not to think about it, but when I do, I just cry.
And that is fine.
And that is fine. Tawanda said, Me too, Christina. I was angry that other moms are still here and mine is not. And that is it, right? And I think it's important to be aware of that, because we do look at that and it's natural, I'm going back to Christina's phrase because she said jealous, but I think it's more of an envy. Like, it's natural, it's not malicious. It's kind of like you can't help but to long for that the way someone else did. And so that can be, that's difficult. I don't want to be mad at women when I see them pregnant and whatever. I don't want to be mad. I don't want to be I want to celebrate, but sometimes I can't, and I'm okay with that. I
Yeah.
used, I used to not be okay with that, but I have a right to feel the way I feel. I have a right to be uncomfortable. And I got a right to be mad sometimes also. And I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My feelings, right? My feelings, yes, yes.
that's it.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I tell you something else that came up for me. Um my father passed away probably in 1997. And recently, when I look at Mariah and Dre and I see their relationship, I'm ecstatic for them, but it makes me sad because that is a relationship I never had. And
Right.
so sometimes I just look at them and I admire the father he is. But the little girl in me is like, wow, is that what my life could have been like? I mean, not from a place of regret or anything, but just
Mhm.
curiosity. And so, I could absolutely relate to what she was saying about a little bit of the envy and jealousy. Hmm.
I think that's a good lead into the statement that Melissa's saying. She says sometimes we have to grieve people who are not dead, but the relationship is. And before touching that, I think what I said yesterday is that when people die, our hopes of what could have been die with them. So when I think of what you just said about your dad, is that if he was not dead, then there could be hope for the relationship, not the 16-year-old, 17-year-old girl with her dad, but the child who longs to just have some semblance uh, of what that looks like, even as an adult.
Yeah.
And so that's difficult. It brings up all of the what ifs,
Mhm.
and what ifs are dangerous if you don't reverse them. So when you think of what if, I can't, what if you can?
Right.
So
Yeah.
Melissa, the relationship is dead. That's absolutely it. There are people, and especially um people who don't have relationships with family, people who don't have relationships with their parents. That can be difficult also, because when that parent dies, or when that person dies, just as I'm saying, that relationship dies with them.
Hmm. And I think that's like you said, it's the finality of it.
Mhm.
I agree with Melissa. I went through that a few years ago. What I'm dealing with my ex was like he was dead, but he's yet alive. Yeah, we talked about that, grieving the ending of a relationship.
Mhm. And they say that divorce is sometimes harder than death, because death is permanent and you don't see the person anymore. But with divorce, you have the propensity to still see them. And that is like reliving the trauma over and over. Before we kind of bring to a close, I want to talk about, oh, you asked about the stages of grief. Melissa said that's the worst type of grief, in my opinion, especially a parent-child relationship. Yeah, Melissa, my heart breaks for broken relationships with parents and children. I don't know why it does to the magnitude that it does, but when there is brokenness in parent child relationships or sibling relationships, I about can't take it. I cannot take it. So the stages of grief, we have denial, we have bargaining, we have acceptance, we have depression and anger. There are eight. Those are five of the eight. The bargaining, God, if I will
Mhm.
God if you all the time. God, if you just let him live. I told God, listen, 2 years ago, I said, God, if you let me live, I promise you, God, I'm gonna do this. Here I am, still short. Thank God he don't treat me the way I treat myself. But yeah, bargaining, the anger. Why is God doing this to me? Just like Christina said, and Tawanda and you. Why me, right? And just angry with God that he could have done something different. The acceptance, that this has really happened. I think it is important to note that the stages of grief are not linear. Like, you're not going from, this is not packaged up so neatly. Like, first I'm mad, first I'm in denial, then I'm mad, now I'll get accepted. No, it doesn't work like that. It's like zick, 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 zick. It can be all over the place. And just like I said on the live the other day, the grief shows up like the narco squad, just banging down the door, coming in, taking up residence, and, becoming a squatter if you let it. And you can't even get rid of it. So you want to find ways to get rid of it. Did we get all of the questions, Sean?
We have one other question. How do you know, and I'm defer this one to you, how do I know when to get professional help?
Oh, so from dental to mental, I'm gonna tell y'all, right? That's my new mindset, dental to mental. That's where you start. If you're going to the dentist twice a year, you should be getting some type of clinical checkup twice a year so that you can flush the line and work on your emotional constipation. So make sure that you are flushing the line twice a year. But when you feel like you don't feel like yourself, whoever you are, it might be time to talk to somebody. If you are sleeping a lot, so some people say they sleep because they want to rest, recognize that there are signs that something is wrong that may mimic or mirror something else. So sometimes people are like, I just finally got some rest. I slept 12 hours. No, ma'am. No, sir. You might be depressed. Or, they're saying, oh man, I had a taste for sweet potato pie, I ate the whole thing. Ma'am, that wasn't a craving. You might be depressed. When you feel like you can't sleep or you're anxious or overwhelmed, if you're yelling at your children, and you don't normally yell at your children, there might be something wrong. If you're yelling at your spouse, it might be something wrong. If you're silent when you're normally not silent, it might be a sign. So really just having some level of check-in. When somebody says, if you notice that people are constantly saying, you good? You sure you good? You all right?
Mm.
You might want to check in with that. I came up with this concept a couple of months ago. You have manipulating, you have masking, and you have managing. This is what I think people do with their feelings. You manipulate. Manipulating is when you're convincing yourself that nothing is wrong. That's when you like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. No, that's regular. This is normal. And you're manipulating your feelings so that you don't have to acknowledge them. And then masking is when you realize, oh, shucks, I think I'm jacked up. I got a problem, but you don't want anyone else to know. So you're like, hey, girl, what's good? And you show up with your representative so that people don't know that you breaking down on the inside. And then there is managing. Managing is when you realize, hey, this problem is wearing me down, and I'm going to get some help so that I could feel and then deal and then heal. So you want to go from manipulating
Mm-hmm.
to masking to managing so that you can get the help that you need.
And I would also add, if you're using alcohol, if you're using substances,
Thank you.
I think that's for sure a sign. And I'm not talking, an occasional, like, after work, you pour yourself a glass of wine or you're out with friends or whatever. But when it gets to the point where you need these substances to try to numb those feelings, that is definitely a sign that you need to, utilize the services of a professional. When you're sleeping excessively because you're trying to turn off those thoughts, and you definitely need a clinical therapist to help you with that. So there are definitely signs. And with most employers, as our cousin said last week, there's an employee assistance plan. There's lots of sliding scales. Don't think you can't financially afford mental health.
So Sonia just said the wine has become my best friend, and I was getting ready to say before. Oh, Karen! Oh no, Karen said that. Why did I think that was Sonia? Lord, Karen.
Sonia said all that. Hold on, slow down.
I guess
Yeah.
So I was getting ready to say to you, Lashon, if you saw me drinking a glass of wine, what would you think?
Yeah, I would definitely check in, and I would definitely question you, because that's out of your character at this season. This season in your life, that's out of your character.
I've been out of that season for 17 years, but if by chance you see me with something other than a ginger or root beer, you better get us into some help. It's all downhill from there. I want to show you. I want to show you guys something. I am going to talk about the empty seat at the table. But I want to show you guys my favorite calming technique. Just because I think that I should. All right. So my favorite calming technique is the what, Lashon? Lashon is freezing. She don't even get to tag team with me on this since I was putting her on the spot anyway. So I'm going to tell y'all, this must have been the lead-in for this. My favorite, oh, there she is.
Okay.
You were frozen.
Woo, yeah. Okay. I told my internet's been jinky all day. I told you, go quick.
My favorite calming technique is the what, Lashon?
Butterfly.
Yes. So all y'all who are with us, if you're with me, type butterfly. If you want to learn how to calm down, type butterfly in the chat. Come on, come on, come on. The butterfly is my absolute favorite. Well, one of my absolute favorite calming techniques, but it is one that I use all the time, and I try to get everybody to butterfly with me. So this is not your Jersey butterfly from the 90s, the one where we do the dance, and that's not this.
Dancing is good too, though.
Yes, dancing is good. All right, yeah. So we got butterflies from Kyrie and from Christina and Karen. I know I saw Rose. Did you see Rosebud comment? Because it's not showing up here, but I saw it, which means there are some comments that are not coming up. I saw Rosebud send a comment from somewhere. So that just lets me know that we're missing some still. Okay, I digress. But I want to make sure that we get this Monica butterfly. So I'm going to tell y'all how powerful the butterfly is. Okay, y'all are with me? It's so powerful that when I'm around here spazzing out or getting a little bit excited on the negative excitement side, Kyrie be like, I'm gonna need you to do a butterfly. Can you go ahead and do a butterfly? So here it is. I want you to sit somewhere and put your feet flat on the ground. Y'all see how excited I get about the butterfly? I do. It's in my logo. Butterflies bring about change. All right. So now, if you're sitting flat in your chair, I'm going to take your word for it. And then I want you to think of 3 positive statements. So I want you to think of 3 positive statements. When you got your 3 positive statements, just go ahead and put a number 3 in the chat. 3 positive statements about yourself. 3 things about yourself. You got to get your 3 things, Lashon. And when you get your 3 things, I want you to put them in the chat. No, you don't have to put your things in the chat. Put the 3 in the chat. These are your personal things, personal affirmations. I will give you an example. So if I feel if I see a woman with a baby and it's a season that I'm frustrated and jealous, these are my three things I would say. I have value regardless. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, because that means that I'm not defective, and I am enough. Okay?
Mm,
So I have value regardless. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and I am enough. Those are my three affirming statements. And
mm.
I'm going to show you how I do my butterfly. Okay. And then I'm going to go to Rose's statement. Okay. You guys ready for the butterfly? So here we go. So you're going to take your hands like this, and you're going to put them across your chest.
So I have my two thumbs touching each other.
You have your two thumbs touching each other. Thank you, Sean. If this is not comfortable for you, whether you're busty or not busty, you can put your hands here, wherever feels most comfortable for you. And I promise you, y'all are going to want to do this with your babies or whomever. So I want you to take 3 deep breaths. So you're going to breathe in through your nose and hold it for 4. Normally I say 8, but for the sake of time, we're going to say 4. In through your nose, hold it for 4, and then exhale. So in through your nose, and then exhale. And then in through your nose, and exhale. In through your nose, and exhale. And then you're going to start your butterfly tapping. So it's going to be an alternate tap. And mine is, and you can look at me and then you can do yours. I have value regardless. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am enough. I have value regardless. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And I am enough. I have value regardless. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And I am enough. So you can do your 3 things 3 times and then put a 2 in the chat when you're done.
And what I notice is I start to feel calm. I start to feel centered. I can feel my breathing feeling more shallow. It moves kind of from my heart into my tummy or my belly area.
Mm-hmm. So Deb did hers, Karen. If you have any comments, or if you feel calm, or if you thought this was valuable, let me know in the chat. And because we're in this live stream environment, I encourage you to try it again later when you just want to woosah, because this is what I tell people: do it 4 times a day. The likeliness is that you are worked up throughout your day. So when you start, you do your prayer and your devotion, your meditation, whatever you do in the morning, butterfly. You know, managing through the day, you realize you're almost to lunch or right at lunch, butterfly. You get through the day and your work is almost over, butterfly. End of the day and you just kind of want to woosah and take it down, butterfly. And you can change those statements. You can use 3 statements, 5 statements, 1 statement. If you have a challenge with your children and then you want to just like wring their neck, then just say this child doesn't mean any harm. Whatever it is that you need to install to have peace and calm, that is what you can say for yourself. And that's my butterfly. Sean, you want to Rose's statement?
It's on. There's a song, I Want to Live by a Black Male, that acknowledged the burden of the systemic racism that faces African American men. Asia found it. I went to look for it. I have no idea where it is. And We must acknowledge the African Americans that live in a hostile environment, and many of the behaviors that develop may not serve the emotional needs. Ooh.
All right, Rosebud, that's our next topic. And don't be surprised if you get tapped on the shoulder to join us for a lot.
Well, she's been in this social work game long before we even knew what social work was. So,
That's absolutely right. So we might have to have Rosebud join us for the conversation so we can address that, because that is valid. We are in these hostile environments, and the behaviors are not necessarily serving us that we see. Listen, I can't wait to share with y'all what I'm doing right now. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. I am so excited to be Black. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, sorry, I digress. But I am excited. I'm telling y'all, I'm fit. I'm getting ready. We gonna be free, y'all. No. So let me just say this. Because the holidays are here. Thanks, Deb. Monica, good night. Thanks for joining us. Karen, we're glad that it's been valuable. And Deb, I'm so glad that it was valuable for you and much needed. So I hope you guys use it. We will be doing some more mindfulness stuff because Lashon loves to connect to the breath. But I want to leave you guys kind of with this. First, a reminder about the love of family effort. Lashon, you want to do that, and then I'll.
yeah, thank you. So far, we have been overwhelmed by the support that we have received. So, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. On the post is the Cash App. We are, for the holiday season, we are looking to adopt a family. We want to provide this family with gift cards and cash so that they can use it to, to bless their family for whatever they need. We had a lot of offers for donations of clothing. At this time, unfortunately, for this particular event, we are not collecting clothing. It is an opportunity for us to bless this family with a cash donation and gift card donations for groceries and different things that they would need. So we do appreciate the offer for the donations, but at this time, we're just going to ask you to find another charity to go ahead and bless them with that. So thank you so much. On the post is the Cash App. We are still accepting cash donations. $5, $10, whatever you feel led in your
$1.
or yes.
$1. Look, then you go to the Dollar Tree. $1. So. But I want to say this because I received some inquiries today, like people who were talking about yesterday's chat on grief. And one of the biggest takeaways for people was the empty seat at the table. I don't want us to dismiss it or take it lightly that people automatically understand that there will be a gap where death is, or even relationships. Parents, I am urging you to teach your children the permanency of death when you feel it's ready. I'm going to tell y'all who taught me. Now, I shared how for all of these years, I learned how to do an obituary and all of these things. But little Zoe Jones taught me that children need to be taught about grief. Little Zoe Jones, my niece, has shown me that she, at 5 and 4 years old, grieved the loss of Nana. And so while we saw it with Cherie at 9, right, it's kind of expected because it's long. But seeing it with Zoe at 5, I want y'all to really get and understand the impact that death has on children, right? What I will tell you is that children connect activities and things to people. And when that activity or thing is broken, it is causing a brokenness in the child. We do not know or see why these things are happening. Parents may not recognize it. Children are shutting down. They are not talking. We know too many people who are experiencing death and loss right now. Please, y'all, have a conversation about the empty seat at the table. For Zoe, when My Hallelujah Belongs to You comes on, that is Nana's song, not because she sang it, but because she heard it at the funeral. And so when she hears that song, it is causing emotion in her that she will always experience because of the connection to that song. And that's just one thing. I've seen so many parallels and connections to grief with my Nana and Zoe. And so we have learned how to work with that. But it came out of being intentional. And I think it's critical for parents to figure out how your children are dealing with grief. If you know you're hurting, please know they're hurting. Their silence does not mean they're not feeling anything. So please, please, please talk about the empty seat at the table, the phone that will not ring, and the absence of the person that filled a spot for you. So critical. You're on mute.
Hmm. And on that note, I just encourage everyone to have the hard conversations, really just acknowledging how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. So when think about how you feel and realize that you're not alone. So you guys, this has been great. I hope that you were encouraged and blessed and that you got something from this. You can still share and like the video. We're going to put up a reminder post for the love of family, and hope that, if you feel led and you can donate, we appreciate it. If not, and you share it, we appreciate it. We love you all, and we're grateful that you spent this time with us tonight.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.